We meet Iris, who wakes up in her home and goes to kitchen and gets a pocket knife and leaves home. She doesn't take her mobile and takes her car and drives her car towards the forest and comes to a park. She gets down and walks through jungle and comes to a cliff, and we see there is a photo of a boy here. This photo belongs to her son Mateo, who died here, and Iris has come to visit this place and remember him. She then goes near the edge of the mountain and decides to jump and end her pain of losing her son. Suddenly, she is stopped by a man who introduces himself as Richard and asks Iris her name. She asks her to step back and talk with her, but Iris says she won't do so, and Richard tells her a story. He says his girlfriend Chol died in a car accident in college, and he was in a hospital bed for 2 months. His girlfriend even tried talking to him before she died, and they were supposed to be married. Iris feels sad and says they came here for a hiking trip and their son Mateo was looking for wooden sticks. He slipped and fell down the mountain, and now she wants to die, and Richard tells her she has to decide what to do next. Richard says it's a beautiful day and leaves from there, and Iris decides not to jump and follows him. They both walk back to their cars, and Iris thanks him and says goodbye and tries to get in her car. She sees the cars are parked very near each other, and she isn't able to get in her car, and Richard offers help. He gets down and Iris sees he has an umbrella, even though it's not raining, and Richard uses the umbrella and electrocutes her. He then lays her down and ties her hand and legs and puts her in back seat of his car and drives from there. Iris wakes up scared and tries to free herself, and Richard says there is no use, and Iris tries to make a call with her smartwatch. Richard says there is not network here, and Iris takes the knife from her pocket and tries to cut the ropes. She asks Richard about Chloe and tries to engage him in talks, and Richard says she can't get him emotional. He tells Iris reminds him of Chloe, and Iris asks what he's going to do with her, and Richard says he has a cabin in woods. He is going to take her there and kill her, and Iris cuts her rope and attacks Richard, and this causes the car to crash. They both are injured and start fighting and attacking each other, and Iris manages to push Richard out of car. She then cuts the ropes of her legs, and Richard comes near her and asks if she is feeling anything strange. Richard shows her an injection and says he is given paralyzing drug, which will shut down her body. He says within 20 minutes her complete body will shut down. First she will not feel her fingers and slowly lose all her body movement, including her voice. He asks her to give him the knife, but Iris gets scared and runs from there and drops the knife. Richard says running will increase the drug effect, and Iris runs towards the jungle to save herself. She remembers how she used to teach counting to Mateo and sees Richard has followed her here. She runs and hides from him and sees her finger are losing sensation and puts a 20-minute timer on her watch. She goes away from there and feels she is losing control in her leg and is unable to walk properly also. She goes towards a jungle and Richard follows her, and Iris is unable to walk and falls down and crawls. Richard comes to find her, and we see Iris hiding behind a tree and is unable to move and see ants. The ants have climbed her hand and face, and she screams, and Richard hears her and goes towards her. Iris crawls towards water and dives in, and Richard says she won't be able to swim and water current moves her. She flows with the river and grabs a fallen tree to get out water and crawls towards the land. She sees she has 10 minutes remaining and somehow slowly crawls out of water and feels heavy in breathing. Her 20-minute timer is over and she is unable to move and sees someone is coming, and we see an old man Bill. He gets scared seeing Iris like this and checks on her and sees she cannot talk and is paralyzed and only blinks. He communicates with Iris, and she blinks 1 for yes and 2 for no, and Bill comes to know she needs help. He decides to carry her inside his house and brings a wheelbarrow to lift and takes her inside the house. Suddenly, they hear a knock on door, and Iris blinks her eyes repeatedly and warns Bill about danger. Bill opens the door to see Richard, who says he and his wife were involved in a car accident and she can't move. Bill says he will help and sees Richard is bleeding and goes inside to call for help, and Richard follows him. Richard says he needs to use phone since he lost his in accident, and Bill tells him to calm down. He says he will call the police and inform them, and Richard starts crying and Bill asks his name. Richard lies and tells his name is Andrew and says his wife Chloe has mental issues and says false things. If police come here, they will take her back to mental hospital and he can't lose her again. Richard says he let Chloe drive and they were arguing and got distracted and this caused the accident. We see Iris is hiding behind the sofa Richard is sitting on, and Richard says he yelled at her and is sorry. Richard says he woke up after the accident to find her missing, and sometimes Chloe gets paralyzed. Bill is surprised to know this, and Richard says it due to her mental state, and Bill says his wife has passed away. She died of heart attack, and he took her for granted, and says he wants to tell him something. Suddenly Richard's phone rings and Bill is surprised and says he had lost the phone, but Richard lies. He says he got confused due to accident and Bill asks him to leave, and Richard says he knows he is hiding her. Bill says he doesn't want any trouble and says Chloe is hiding in the shed, and Richard asks for the phone. Bill gives him the phone and then pushed Richard and then takes the phone and calls the police about Richard. This makes Richard angry and they both start fighting and Bill punches Richard and then kicks him. Richard finds a knife and attacks Bill in his leg and then stabs Bill many times in his stomach and kills him. Iris sees all this, but is unable to do anything about it, and Richard hears the police is sending someone. He throws the phone and checks the shed for Iris, but doesn't find her and decides to burn the house. He takes gasoline and pours it all over the house, and Bill and Iris sees all this, and Richard throws a lighter. The house catches fire with Iris inside it, and Richard goes outside to start car, but feels something. He comes back and finds Iris and lifts her and puts her in Bill's car and tells her this is her fault Bill died. They leave from there, and Richard says this is first time he has killed a man, and he gets a call on mobile. His daughter has called to inform him about her report card, and she tells they are coming to cabin to surprise him. Richard is shocked to hear his wife and daughter are coming to same cabin he is going and gets scared. Richard talks to his wife and tells her not to come since he requires this time alone at cabin to refresh. His wife says their daughter is missing him and she convinces Richard, and he agrees without any choice. Richard is not happy and sees the petrol is low and goes to a station to refill it and gets down the car. Iris sees she has some movement in her fingers and sees nearby to get some help and tries to lift hand. She slowly removes her seatbelt and sees a young boy who reminds him of his son and tries to talk. Richard comes and puts her seatbelt again, and they leave from there, and he drives to his old car. He tries to start it but is unable to do so and changes his clothes and removes injection and other stuff. He then finds a chain to tow his car, and Iris sees all this unable to move and sees a police car come. The police officer gets down and goes to talk to Richard and says someone say their car accident and called. Officer wants to talk with Iris, but Richard says she is drunk and tells his name as Andrew. He gives his license to officer, who tells him it has expired, and Richard makes a false story. He says his wife got in an accident and he rushed here to help her and will renew his license soon. Iris moves her hand and opens the car window, and the officer goes to talk to her, but she can't reply. Richard says they lost their son, and this made her wife start drinking as she could not forgive herself. Iris cries and officer goes near her, and she whispers to help her, and he asks Richard what is going on. Officer sees the injection, and Richard takes the chain and hits the officer with it many times and kills him. He puts the body in his car, destroys his radio, and sets the car on fire, and decides to leave from there. We see Iris has taken the injection, and Richard says he will blame her for officer's death. Iris can speak now and says his plan is failing and soon his family will be there and he will be exposed. Iris asks did he lose his mind after Chloe's accident when he was in hospital bed for 2 months. Richard says when he saw Chloe dying, he found his purpose in life and felt alive for first time. He wanted to live that moment again and again and started killing others, and Iris asks him to think about his family. She says she knows Richard loves his family and will get caught and lose them and asks to leave her. Richard gets angry and drives away and arrives at a lake, and Iris attacks him with a paralyze injection. She is unable to push the injection as she is still weak, and Richard takes the injection out of his leg. Iris says she was anyways dying, so why he saved her, but he says it was her decision not to jump. Richard says she was meant to die by him and gets down and takes a knife and drags her to the boat. He unties the boat and takes it to the middle of the lake, and Iris starts crying and asks for Mateo's toy. The toy is in her left pocket and Richard comes to remove it, but Iris takes the knife and stabs him in the neck. Richard falls down the boat and drops his gun, and Iris quickly grabs it and shoots Richard, who tries to climb back in boat. He falls in water and we see him swimming away from boat, and Iris is happy but sees the boat is leaking. The bullets made hole in the boat and it starts sinking, and Iris takes a deep breath and the boat sinks. Iris is now able to use her hands and legs and she swims to the shore and sees Richard is also here. Richard is unable to breathe properly and is about to die. Iris goes to him and instead of killing him says thank you to him and leaves from there.